back. There could be muscular pain. There could be other causes. There's a section on prevention and then a section on treatment. There are different types of back pain, like we said. Back pain in quotes because a lot of people say back pain and it could be kind of anywhere. But we try to give you different regions. So the different regions, I'm going to put my mouse on the screen just so you guys can see. The pink over here is the cervical spine or the neck. The mid-back area or the thoracic spine is the vertebrae or the bones that have the ribs attached to them. And then the lower part or of the spine is the lumbar spine as well as the sacral spine. The lumbar spine is what people will call their low back region for the most part. And then the sacral spine is in the buttocks region. At the end, there's a fused coccyx, and that's usually the last tip of the spine. With that being said, your spinal cord, so the whole point of the spine, these bones, is to protect the spinal cord. The spinal cord kind of lives in this region right here, where those little holes are, or where the nerves come out of. And the actual cord ends around this region right here, L1, L2, and it becomes all these nerves hanging in water. So they call it the cauda equina, or the horse's tail, because that's what it kind of looks like. All right, so diving into each specific category. So neck pain comes from the upper portion of the spine under the skull. So that cervical spine or the neck region that I'd shown you in the previous slide. It consists of vertebrae that has. So these are just anatomy. The anatomy of the vertebrae has the body, pedicle, lateral masses, and spinous processes. From each. The vertebra protects the spinal cord and cervical nerves as they exit at each level. This is a picture of that. So you can see these are the bones, and within this area or within the bone, you wouldn't be able to see it really, but is the spinal cord, and that's the whole function of the spine or the vertebral bodies. These bones is to protect the spinal cord and the nerves, which has the nerve or the nerve cells that give you sense or sensation, hot, cold, pain, temperature. I guess that's hot, cold, but temperature, pain, proprioception, where you are in space, vibration. It also helps with your strength. So if I wanted to lift my finger, it's a message from my brain through the spinal canal or the spinal cord. And then it goes through these nerves that go to my finger that say, hey, listen, lift up your finger, and tells the muscles to lift the finger. This is another picture of the cervical spine. It's a little bit more detailed. Essentially, we're cutting it, the bones and the disc in half. So you'll see bones on one side. These are the bones and discs that we all talk about. And then on the other side, you'll see the spinous process, which is the back part of the vertebral structure. In between, you'll see the spinal cord right there, and then the spinal cord is in a sac of cerebral spinal fluid or fluid that protects the nerves. And you can see overall there's a decent amount of space. Even though the spinal cord is there, there's still space on either side of the spinal cord. Now, as we get older, what happens is these discs will start to bulge, we'll see arthritic changes, all that can kind of decrease the space where that nerve lives. So, if you have a herniated disc, technically, if the herniated disc is, let's say, it goes out to here, it's not really affecting your spinal cord, which is the main thing we're looking for. This picture is kind of, both of these pictures, I guess, is kind of looking from the top down, where you'll see, what we look at in the MRI, if physicians kind of go over it with you, or any health practitioner can kind of go over it with you. There's two views that we look at, and one view is this, where we cut down the middle and we're seeing, hey, is there any big significant stenosis or narrowing where the spinal cord is, or is there narrowing from the top down where we can see it down the middle, or where the nerves come out on each side, and that we kind of will go into as we move along. The next type of back pain is the thoracic back pain. It can arise from the mid-back, where there are 12 thoracic vertebrae attached to 12 ribs. And there's a picture on the next slide regarding that. There's a lot of musculature in that area, including muscles attached to the shoulder blade, the lumbar lumbar spine and the low back, the thoracic spine, the ribs. There's a lot of musculature in that area. So this is the thoracic spine. You can see each level has a rib attached to it. You can see that your first rib is there, and then it goes down to your 12th rib down here. Now, as you go lower down in the rib cage, most of the time they're called floating ribs, where they're not attached to anything, but they do have muscle attachments, where sometimes muscles can be attached on the bottom part and then go down to the lumbar spine. The good part about this, the ribs, is that it kind of provides a little stability for the thoracic spine. So it's out of neck pain, mid-back pain, and low back pain, thoracic, or I guess the cervical spine, the thoracic spine, and the lumbar spine. The thoracic spine is where I see the least amount of disc herniations or problems, because I think the rib cage stabilizes it pretty well. A lot of times when people have mid-back pain, it can be either one referred from, or like shoulder blade pain can be referred from the neck, but sometimes when they have mid-back pain, it's usually muscular, in my opinion. Low back pain. So this is the area of the 5 lumbar vertebrae. This is where the nerves that control your legs exit the spinal column. Can be associated with the nerves of the spine, joints. So pain can be from nerves of the spine, the joints of the spine, muscles, and or joints near the spine, which are the hip and the SI joint. So this is a picture of the lumbar spine. You can see these are bones and discs that everybody talks about. This is the spinal cord right here, and then you'll see nerves coming out. So the best way for me to picture it, and kind of how I explain it to patients, is think of the spinal cord and the nerves coming out as like cars on a highway. So when I showed you the picture of the neck, I showed you how much extra space there was for the neck to live, the spinal cord to live. I picture that as like 10 cars out of in a 15-lane highway. So if you have, like I said, disc bulges or herniations, you technically can have some space. So you may bulge into those last 2 lanes that are being used. So then you do have 13 or 12 lanes for a 10-lane for 10 cars essentially. Same thing with where the nerves come out. When nerves come out, it's like 1 car taking up a 3-lane exit. So when you have disc herniations or arthritic changes in the spine, that may decrease that exit lane from 3 lanes to 2 lanes. But it doesn't mean that the nerve doesn't have enough space to live. It just means that you may be more susceptible to that nerve hitting the sides and causing radicular pain or sciatica. Another thing I want to point out in this picture is the disc has like a kidney bean shape. So the spinal cord lives in this area. This is a top-down view. The spinal cord lives in this area. You have a lot of my analogies, if you heard my lecture before, is food analogies or highway analogies. I don't know, it's just 2 things that make sense to me, I guess. So that's why I use them. So the disc is kind of like a jelly donut. You have the outer layer, which is the dough, and then the jelly on the inside. So you can see where the annulus or the fibrous outside layer can tear, and you'll see extrusion of the disc or herniated disc material. Another part of this picture is the joint part. So this is the vertebral body, which is here, and then it communicates with the one below and the one above it via these joints called the facet joint. And then you'll see discs above and below that. So causes of back pain. If the nerves get pinched, we call it radiculopathy. It can be from a herniated disc, for that disc herniating. It could be arthritic changes. It could be there's a ligament in the back that can buckle, or a combination of these, which is what we usually see. When the spinal cord or the nerves get pinched centrally, so down the middle, where that central highway is, that's what we call spinal stenosis. So when it gets pinched from the nerve, when it comes out off the spinal or the central canal, and then or the central highway, and then it's on its way to the exit canal, the exit lane, if it gets pinched there, that's called radiculopathy. A lot of people call it sciatica. Both are interchangeable. When you talk about spinal stenosis, things that you worry about are really 2 things. One is if the spinal cord is so compressed that you're causing swelling within the spinal cord. That's called myelopathy. And then if you have, and you'll see them more in the cervical spine or the thoracic spine, and you'll see people will have symptoms of they'll have trouble walking, they'll have trouble holding things in their hands, they'll have trouble buttoning their buttons, zipping their zippers. They can have bowel or bladder issues, incontinence, pain, or pooping on themselves, or retention, or numbness or tingling on the inside of the legs, weakness of the hands or the legs are all things that can be seen with myelopathy. With neurogenic claudication, that's seen more in the low back, where it's so narrow that as patients walk, what happens is that area where the stenosis or that narrowing is in the lumbar spine gets worse, and that's where people will feel usually heaviness of their legs. They feel like their legs become lead. They can have exacerbation of pain, and it's usually after walking. Let's say I walk 100 feet, and then that's when I feel it every time. And then I sit down, I feel much better, and then I get up and I'm able to walk another 100 feet. So that sounds like symptoms of neurogenic claudication. The other thing that you can see with neurogenic claudication is that patients will say, hey, I can lean on a cart and I can walk for 500 feet with no problem. So that tells me that by bending, you're opening up that central canal and increasing the ability, or decreasing the narrowing of that central canal. So a few nice pictures that I think are pretty good in the sense that they can tell you about pathology of the spine. So on the top left, you'll see normal. This is the top-down view. You'll see the disc. You'll see this is the spinal canal with space around it, and then you'll see the nerves coming out on both sides. This picture, you'll see cervical radiculopathy, where you'll see this disc is herniated. You'll see the spinal cord. This side is normal, and then you can see how this side is pinched. Same concept. This is a little bit more about stenosis. So you can see there's different ways that the nerves can be affected. You can see arthritis over here affecting the nerve right here. You can see a herniated disc pushing on the nerve right there. You can see the ligament can either buckle or it can be thickened, causing some or increasing stenosis in this area. This is normal, and then the same thing here. You'll see the ligament kind of thickening, and you'll see degenerative changes that can cause narrowing of that spinal cord and causing symptoms. So distribution, many times patients have different findings on their imaging and multiple levels of stenosis narrowing, so you can and arthritis. So how do we decide where the problem is? So you can have an MRI where the report shows herniations at every level. You can see arthritic changes at every level. So what's causing it? The arthritis is the nerve knee pinch, is the herniated disc. So essentially, it boils down to history and physical. By listening to a patient, I think will give you half of your story, if not all of it, and then the rest will be done with the physical. Now, an MRI or pictures, sometimes patients come and saying, I need an MRI. It's not the whole picture. It's essentially a piece of the puzzle, not the whole puzzle. So an MRI can kind of verify what you saw in your history physical, but it usually doesn't go the other way around, where an MRI should lead you to what the diagnosis is 100%. But without a doubt, an MRI can help support your history physical, but most of your information and your diagnosis should come, majority of the time, if not all the time, should be from your history physical. So essentially, by listening to somebody's history, you can tell where their complaints are. So when somebody says, hey, I have pain in my neck going down my whole arm to every finger, and it's the whole arm completely, that doesn't really help, because it doesn't narrow it down for us. Now, if you can kind of figure out, hey, listen, I feel it in my shoulder blade, and I feel it going down to my middle finger, mostly, then that kind of tells, hey, maybe more of a C7. And then we kind of correlate that with your MRI. Same thing with sensation. So I told you the nerves control motor strength. They also control your sense, your feeling. So if you have numbness in your thumb, and then on your right side compared to your left side, and then the rest of your fingers are normal on both sides, that tells me, hey, it may be more of a C6 problem, or that nerve distribution. same picture or similar picture. So other different causes other than nerve pain are facet joint pain. So facet joints, like I said, like I told you before, is the communication between the two vertebrae. So most of the weight goes through the disc, but as the disc starts to degenerate, which happens with aging, a lot more pressure goes onto these joints of the back. Now, arthritis is kind of like gray hair in the spine. It happens if we all live old enough, we'll all get it. But the question is that arthritis causing your symptoms? And that's what the exam kind of leads you. Arthritis can also cause, kind of like in the knee and other joints, you'll see bony formations around arthritic joints. So that bony formation can kind of limit the area where that nerve comes out of and cause radiculopathy. So they're not usually, they don't always have to be separate things. They may be two things contributing to each other. So usually located in the low back and can radiate into your legs, but not past the knee. Cervical facets joints can go into your neck and into your shoulder, but not usually down your arms. This type of pain is worse with extension and gets better with flexion. So extension is leaning back with your hands on your hips, and then flexion is leaning forward. Other causes of back pain, like we said, are muscular. So sometimes you'll have muscle spasms and strains, which can be very difficult. They get very tight on you. You get cramping. Sometimes it happens on its own. You twist it the wrong way, and you just kind of put a muscle out of whack. Sometimes it can be from nerves itself as well. So radiculopathy, what can happen is that the nerve gets pinched, and your body reacts by tightening the muscles around it to protect you. So after a while, those muscles get tired too, and that can kind of contribute to the pain. In this, for an exam, if I push, or any healthcare professional, if they push on that muscle and it's very tender, that may be a sign that it could be a muscle pain. Like I said, in the thoracic spine, a lot of the times there's a lot of muscles in that region, so that can cause pain. Usually common pain generators are the rhomboids in this area, deltoids, the levator scapula in this area as well, upper trapezius. All those are all kind of pain generators that are fairly common, and that can be from posture. It can be from scoliosis in some cases. It can be from like we said, just kind of straining a muscle, and then there's compensatory mechanisms that kind of throw everything out of whack. Other causes of back pain, there's shoulder pain that can mimic neck, so it's very important to differentiate between the two. Sometimes they're both going on at the same time. We call it neck pain, so shoulder and neck pain. For the lumbar spine, a lot of times the hip can be masked by lumbar pain, and the sacroiliac joint also. They all kind of have similar complaints that they can all have pain in the same area, in the sense of the buttocks or the hip groin region, or and the very low back. Looking at this kind of model in the back, you can kind of see. So you can see, let's correlate. The green is the lumbar spine, you can see, and then below that is the sacral spine. This is the iliac bone of the hip. So you can see here, right in between that orange and the white, is the sacroiliac joint. So it's very close. So a lot of people complain of pain right in this region, and very close to that low back region. As for the hip is right here, but it usually goes into the groin. So very common that they can kind of mask each other. So it's very important. The history and physical will also help kind of differentiate what pain is kind of coming from where. And it may be, like we said, a few things going on at once. It can be that the hip is acting up, kind of causing back pain, or contributing to back pain because of the compensation. Those are all possibilities, but a good history and physical can help you kind of decipher where to start with. These are just some pictures of the hip. You can see on the left, this is a normal hip. On the right, this is a cartoon picture of damaged cartilage and cartilage changes. This is an X-ray image. You can see a nice. This is the top of your leg bone. This is the acetabulum or the socket, the hip bone,
is another, this is a cartoon illustration, the SI joint, so I had the spine today, so it was easier to show you that way, but the same concept. This is your lumbar spine, this is your sacral spine, this is your hip bone, and then a part of the hip bone, and then this is that joint in between, so this can be a pain generator. Hard to diagnose in the sense that you need a few provocative tests to say, hey, that's sacroiliitis. MRIs don't do it justice in the sense that you can see arthritic changes on CTs and MRIs, but is it really diagnostic of sacroiliitis? It's not, at least in my experience. So the only way to diagnose and treat it is by doing an injection. Prevention. So taking care of your back. It's a short slide, not a lot of bullets, but at the same time, there's some content in it. Try to avoid heavy lifting. Some patients do that for a living, so it's harder to ask that, but it's important to kind of remember proper mechanics. So using your legs more than your back, instead of bending at your waist and lifting something, bending your legs, taking up something, stabilizing your back, and then using your legs to bring it up the rest of the way is what I usually advise. If it's something extremely heavy or if it's heavier than what you're used to, maybe even asking somebody for help so you can kind of unload the weight a little bit. Using correct posture, and that's kind of all the time. It's easier said than done, especially a lot of us, I'm sure have been including myself, have been at home more than we've been used to or accustomed to. So using the computer and, after using the computer for a while, watching a movie for a while, being on your phone for a while, everybody starts to slump down a little bit. We all see it, or we've all, we're probably doing it without even knowing it. So it's just to try to be aware of your posture, and when you notice you're doing it, try to correct your posture. Do some of the exercises that you can kind of stretch out those muscles. Those are all kind of things that easier said than done. I understand that part of it, but it's something that may help you prolong getting symptoms or prolong getting worsening symptoms. Or prevent getting worsening symptoms. Be active. So perform stretches, home exercises. Main focus is core strengthening, usually back extension, but that can vary if it's real bad lumbar stenosis. You don't want to be extending your back as much. But I think there should be a strong emphasis on core strengthening. It's harder to do and harder to kind of see results from, I think, but know that by strengthening your core, what you're doing essentially is strengthening the muscles around your spine. I kind of hit on it before. With the thoracic spine, you have the ribs. For the sacral spine, you have the hips to kind of protect the bones that are giving extra support. When it comes to your neck and your low back, your spinal column is just the bones of the spinal column. Everything else is held up by muscles. So if those muscles get weak, what happens is more of the stress goes onto the lumbar spine or the cervical spine, and that can accelerate the degeneration. So the disc lose their strength, the arthritis will advance. So those are all things to kind of keep in mind. So the things that I always recommend are and I should add this to the slide, but neck exercises as well as core strengthening and back exercises. Eat healthy and lose weight. Also less stress on the spine. The less weight you have to kind of walk around with, the less stress on the spine, and that will help with the being active part of it. Also, the thing being, there's another thing, easier said than done, right? So, I'm sure all the analogies of like jelly donut and stuff isn't helping with that part of it, but I think that by decreasing your weight or your BMI, you're just putting less stress on your spine and increasing the longevity of it. One of my mentors had told me we're only born with one spine, so the best way to kind of take care of it is by preventing anything bad from happening to it. So trying everything you can, eating healthy, losing weight, being active, home exercises on a daily basis, or even more than that, twice a day, 3 times a day if possible. It's a lot to ask, and like we said, it may not give you results right away, but in the long term, we've seen that it can help patients a lot. Other exercises, yoga, Pilates have been shown to kind of help patients from what we've seen. And then, really any exercises, as long as it's not like you're not competitive. Competitive heavy lifting is tough. I mean, I'm sure it keeps you active, but at the same time, you're putting